Hello and welcome back. The topic of this video is going to be viral tropism. So one thing about viruses have the ability to recognize certain cells, certain tissues, or certain hosts. And that specificity that's associated with the virus, that's the tropism that we're getting at. So you can have tropism that happens at a cellular level, at a tissue level, or at a host level. And I'm going to give you examples of each type, okay? What happens with the viruses and what makes them specific, and we haven't talked about viral replication yet. That will be in an upcoming video. But what happens is the virus has the ability to recognize certain tags. And I've put tags into quotes there. Really what those tags are receptors, okay? And receptors are proteins that kind of hang out on the outsides of cells. Those cells make up tissues. Those tissues make up an entire individual. So whether or not a virus has the ability to infect depends on whether or not that virus is able to recognize the receptor, okay? So for example, okay, a good example, because here in a bit we'll have a video talking more specifically about the HIV virus. So that HIV virus is the human immunodeficiency virus, which is why we call it HIV. That's a lot easier to say, okay? This is going to be our example of cell tropism. Because what happens with the HIV virus infects cells of the immune system. And the tag on the outside of the immune cells is called CD4, all right? So if a cell has that CD4 marker, we refer to it as being CD4 positive, okay? Specifically, this is going to be on the outside of T cells. And I know we haven't talked about T cells yet either, but don't let that throw you. Because what I want to get across right now is just how the specificity happens. So this is the name of the receptor. CD4 is the name of the receptor, because I said it's got to recognize a certain tag. And that CD4 receptor or tag is only on the outside of immune cells. It's not found, for example, on neuronal cells. So the HIV virus can't infect cells associated with the nervous system. So that's the specificity at the cell level, all right? We can also have specificity at, I used HIV and I started that out. Let's continue that for consistency. The next example I'm going to give you is tissue tropism, or tissue specificity. So, in the case of tissue specificity, the flu virus, all right? The flu virus is going to be our example for tissue tropism. So what happens, that flu virus has a receptor that it recognizes. Oops, I can spell today. I really can. Y'all probably don't believe that from my videos, but I can spell. So there's a receptor recognition in lung tissue. So the flu virus specifically is going to infect cells associated with the respiratory system. And that's what makes you miserable when you end up with the flu virus, is it infects the lung, it infects the epithelium associated with the mucous membranes, and that makes you sick, all right? But again, that receptor is not found in neurons. And I can use a different example here too, so you think I'm not just picking on the brain. But there aren't receptors for the flu virus associated with the kidney. So the tissue tropism for the flu virus is it infects a specific tissue type, not and doesn't infect other tissue types, okay? The last example is a little bit bigger, and I'm going to kind of go lengthwise this way with this last example. And our virus is, in this case, the myxoma virus. And that myxoma virus is a virus that makes rabbits sick, okay? So it normally would infect rabbits, but it doesn't infect people. So this is an example of host tropism. Bunnies get exposed to the myxoma virus. That makes them sick. Humans, because we don't have the tag that that myxoma virus needs to recognize, it doesn't make us sick, okay? So we can have tropism at the cellular level, the tissue level, and the host level. And that host level, where that's important, it's important because the majority of viruses out there are going to be host specific, which means most of the viruses that make your cat or dog sick are not going to get you sick. And likewise, the viruses that make you sick don't typically make your pet sick, all right? Now, if you notice there, I said majority, because this is still biology and we have exceptions in biology, all right? I'm going to kind of put this over here. I'll draw a line, okay? There are some viruses that will, and I'm going to put this in quote, will jump species, all right? Which means they can infect multiple different hosts, all right? So it's, in the case of those viruses, typically what happens is the receptor that that virus uses is either identical or more often it's similar in the other species. So getting viruses to jump species isn't common, but it does happen. And I'm going to use a virus that we've already talked about, the flu virus, because the flu or the influenza virus can also be present in birds and pigs, in addition to us. So if you've ever heard of cases of the bird flu coming out or swine flu, because when we talk about swine flu, we're talking about pigs. Usually what happens is there's a mutation in that influenza virus that essentially allows the host tropism to be overridden. And what happens, that swine flu now is similar enough to a receptor that is present in the human body that if the pig gets sick, we potentially can catch it, okay? So that's an example of host tropism where you can have things go from different hosts, all right? But typically with tropism, we're talking about recognizing specific receptors that are associated with the virus. And that's what makes them specific, and that's what tropism gets at, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know.